Welcome to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey Dunn, educator, priestess, and professional somatic therapist. In April 2025, I went through a priestess initiation of old and launched the Priestess Initiations podcast 6 months later. Whatever brought you here today, I invite you to drop into the spiral with me. Let's begin. Welcome back to Priestess Initiations, the Goddess Coven. I'm Casey, this is episode 13, and today I'm in conversation with one of my coven sisters, April, about the witch wound. Throughout season 1, we've explored initiation, Isis and reassembly, the fall, what the body remembers, creative practice as priestess work, shadow work with Lilith, Medusa, and Persephone. But underneath all of this work is a deeper wound that many of us carry, the witch wound, and of course how it connects to Hecate, Queen of Witches. If you haven't listened to her story yet, check out episode 8 and come back here when you're done. The witch wound is the ancestral, collective, personal fear of being too much, too powerful, too visible, too wild. The fear that if we claim our priestess power, we'll be punished for it. This wound shows up as hiding your gifts, playing small, even when you're capable of more, being terrified of visibility, and the voice that says, "Who am I to teach this? Who am I to claim this?" And this week, the cosmos is asking us to face it directly. This week has been building powerful transformation energy. You might have noticed if you're on our Patreon, where members get the full list of this week's transits posted every week, that on Monday night, Venus met Pluto in Aquarius. Love and feminine power descending into the underworld. This is witch wound territory, reclaiming the power that was suppressed, the wisdom that was called dangerous. If you felt relationships or values shifting, if old wounds around being too much or too powerful surfaced, that was Venus, Pluto, asking you to reclaim what's yours. And this Friday morning at 3:28 Mountain Time, the sun conjuncts Pluto in Aquarius. Your identity meets death and rebirth. This is the deepest transformation of the week. And Hecate stands at the crossroad asking, who are you afraid to become? What power are you still keeping hidden to stay safe? Friday is the day to let an old version of yourself die so the priestess can fully emerge. So I called up one of my coven sisters to talk about this with me, because some wounds need to be witnessed, not just explained. April is a fellow somatic therapist specializing in highly sensitive people, and she's also my friend and coven sister. We're going to explore this wound together. Not as me interviewing an expert, but as two women who are both working with this, learning from it, healing it. This is deeply personal for both of us. So let's dive in. So, welcoming April. You want to say hi?
Hi. Hello.
So this is my friend April, and yeah, we're sitting here thinking about this episode and doing this episode and how, in a way, this is also a claiming of the witch wound, right? So April, I wanted to start with, when did you first recognize the witch wound in yourself, but also giving space to this moment and what's arising?
Yeah, well, I'll speak more to when I first started recognizing the witch wound and starting to make those connections. But yeah, as we were sitting down and getting ready to start this, like, I noticed the witch wound is activated in me right now, because when Casey asked me to do this, and she knows me so well, so she knew which parts would come up. And it was the part that was like really excited and like, heck yeah, like, let's do it. And then the other part that's like, oh my gosh, all the things that brings up fear of like, who am I? Or do I have anything to say? Or am I going to be able to like access my wisdom in a moment or in a conversation? Just all of these things. And so that's the beauty of this process, for better or worse, is that when you're working with something like the witch wound, you'll start to co-create opportunities where you can work through that. And so this was a really fun, sweet example of that. Because I'm so grateful to do this and so excited, and then noticing that witch wound come up, and then also being able to honor that part and, you know, let that be witnessed by Casey and then y'all in this moment.
Yeah, I think we're so excited to have you here. I can only really speak for me, but I'm excited. And I think what we're really speaking to in this moment and what I'm hearing is the way that the witch wound is an ongoing process, right? Like, we have both claimed witchiness and being spiritual women and being healers in most aspects of our lives. And yet there's always more.
Yeah, absolutely. There almost feels like there's like levels of growth and development and like new contexts that will activate that or give us an opportunity to grow in that. And so this is a great example of that. And so, yeah, maybe that leads into just when I first started to recognize or maybe use that terminology. And there was something cooking inside of me through graduate school. And so I learned a little bit before grad school, but really throughout grad school, learning about highly sensitive people, which we're going to talk a little bit more about the facets of that in a moment, but just being able to honor my sensitivity. And we were, you know, as when you're studying to be a therapist, you're an internship and you're thinking about what kind of clients and what kind of folks you want to work with. And for me, it started to be really clear that I wanted to work with highly sensitive people because part of my witch wound and my like wounded healer was learning a lot through my own experience and really wanting to empower others because sensitivity is seen as, you know, greater societies as less than. And while it's not the same as introversion, like extroversion is really celebrated in our society. So I felt really called. I really wanted to sit with people and I wanted to help them understand how they oriented in their nervous systems. And when it was time for us to write our master's paper at the end of our 3-year program, there must have been some alchemy, like even the word witch was coming through. And I was thinking about this idea of externalizing. So like when we're healing, our sensitive folks can really internalize things and take on things. And how do we see it as just a part of us and not the whole of us? And so I was thinking about this way to externalize. And I was thinking about the witch's cauldron. And there's just something that clicked for me of like that was one of the first, like this was a progressive thing, but this is one of the first clickings of like, witch. Oh, I really resonate with that. Like witch's cauldron, alchemy. And then that was like one of the first pieces. And then I remember when our friendship deepened, sort of towards the end of grad school and like after. And I remember us sitting on my couch and Casey was teaching me about the goddesses and I started really connecting with Hecate, but then we were like, we should start a coven. And that kind of felt like the next piece of like the witch wound and like sisterhood around it. So just to go back to this idea of like, there's these like next levels of like being seen and, you know, identifying with the word witch and like, whoa, what does that mean?
Yeah. I think there's so many levels. And I think the connection with highly sensitive people is really important. And also this connection with healers. Before we get into the weeds of HSPs, I want to go back to the history for a moment. The witch hunts, the burnings. Just for our listeners, between approximately 1427 and 1782, witch trials spread across Europe, with the peak occurring between 1580 and 1630. And historians estimate that around 40,000 to 60,000 people were executed out of roughly 110,000 trials. And the hunts were most severe in southwestern Germany, Switzerland, France, and northern Italy. But here's what's important to understand. While popular culture often says millions of women healers and midwives were targeted, the historical evidence actually shows something more complex. And it is showing that about 75 to 85% of those accused were women. And the women who were targeted were often accused by their own neighbors during times of social upheaval, religious warfare, and economic crisis. They were seen as threats. And it's not necessarily just because of specific skills that they had, but because they were perceived as different, difficult, or dangerous in some way. And to me, that just screams Lilith energy. So I guess, what do you think it was about women, especially women who didn't conform, women who were visible, who had some kind of power or knowledge that made them such easy targets during collective times of fear?
I just think about power can be such a loaded word, but I'm just thinking about how powerful women are and like how intuitive they are, how empathic they are, even how connected they are to nature. So if you're thinking about in the witch hunts, it was like women who used herbs, and then were called like witch doctors, and like they were doing some kind of weird voodoo, even though they were using the elements of nature and they were actually helping people heal. And so, yeah, there's something about that I think to like the collective, like patriarchal, like the archetype of unhealed masculine energy that's encompassed in, all of us in different generations and times and places, and histories look very different, but there's a lot of similar tenets. And I think there's something about not being able to honor that empowerment in women and being afraid of it.
I think even today, it's really scary to be visible with our spiritual work in a world where the feminist movement and women's empowerment movements have really been demonized as these anti-man hating movements. And I've seen that, as I talked about a little bit in the Lilith episode. And I also think that I've seen a lot of really beautifully integrated Lilith energy. And I'm saying Lilith because she's who, for me, shows up when it's like this fight. Or Kali, too. Like this fight for justice, especially. Lilith's fight for equality between genders. And I think, when I think about those women, I think about it's women who just refuse to fawn, right? And with current events today, I know we were talking about, a little bit before the podcast, just everything that's been happening in the world. Yeah. And how it's hard sometimes to discern between an intuitive place of, okay, now's really the time to maybe stay hidden or fawn, versus when the witch wound is keeping us small, versus when we actually have enough safety. And what is enough safety? There's never going to be such a thing as perfect safety. It's always taking a leap of faith to put yourself out there, to stand up for yourself, to speak up. And there also is a purpose to fawn, to the staying hidden. So how do we start to balance both? But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and also the witch wound in 2026.
Yeah, well, I feel like something that's relevant and a piece that I sort of left out when I was talking about how I was doing my master's paper in this witch wound, kind of clicked into place. And so it's like, it resonates. Like I identify as female. And so for me, like I do really connect, like traditionally, like the word witch with women. And also there are a lot of other marginalized groups, like folks of color, especially marginalization for, women of color. And so that feels really important because the witch wound also, and not to take away the concentration and like of what we're talking about, but just all encompassing is that it's bigger groups of people. have felt the witch wound, because essentially it's like power over, marginalization, fear of difference, fear of outspokenness, fear of empowerment, in whatever way that looks. And so it's just to broaden that out. And then we're seeing a lot of that play out today, and in a lot of scary ways. And so, yeah, this conversation we were having, because it's like, sometimes it is just a spiritual thing where you're sort of, I wouldn't say in your way, but you're having the witch wound and it's blocking. And there's a way that you can kind of like pull through and see what's on the other side. And there might be repercussions of maybe somebody doesn't like you. Maybe, you lose friends, and not to like discredit that these aren't like important or painful things at the time. But it's just like, as you get more in alignment with who you are, sometimes you'll naturally lose people, or there'll be consequences like this, or that you just might be in a bunch of discomfort because your somatic body is trying to catch up with like where your learning and growing is going. And so there's that piece. And then there's like some of these real, like you think about activism, and there's a lot of protests going on, like there's like actual physical safety to think about in how we're showing up for groups of people, and advocating for equity and just human decency and human rights for everyone and all types of folks.
I think that's so important. And thank you for bringing in that nuance. I think that's one of my goals with this podcast, is to always be holding some nuanced perspectives that we don't get to hear elsewhere. And also circling back to the way that trauma lives in the body. Mm-hmm. Last episode, I talked a little bit about intergenerational trauma, and that lives in everyone well, really it lives in everyone, period, but especially in all these marginalized groups. And this historical trauma too, of women who are descended from witches or who had past lives, if they believe in that. But that trauma really lives in us and in our tissues and in our bodies today. And that shows up in the way we respond to these situations. And so it's this complex dynamic of, how do you advocate for yourself to have the right to exist for who you are? How do you advocate for that right for everyone? For everyone, regardless of their race, gender, sexual orientation, size, ethnicity? How do we advocate that everyone should get to be themselves in this world? Yeah. And I think that's a big piece of the witch wound, is this idea that it's okay to be yourself. Because the women who were persecuted, and the men, and there were probably non-binary folks at the time that I'm sure were persecuted that we don't even have documentation of because it was probably written out. How do we hold all of that, knowing this historical trauma lives in our bodies and can so easily send us into fight, flight, freeze? And I get curious how much of that is showing up in the realm of chronic illness and in highly sensitive people. And last episode, I had talked about my own journey with chronic illness a lot, and how some of that relates to the priestess wound for me a little bit. Yeah. Just taking in so much information and having such a highly sensitive nervous system from this ancestral intergenerational patterns, plus the overstimulating world we live in.
Yeah. Well, that brings up like one of my favorite neuroscience facts, is that we have like 14 generations of our ancestors' DNA that lives inside of our bodies. So if you think about that, it's like that has a whole lot of not just trauma, there's resilience too. So we can look at both sides, but that's a lot. Like that kind of makes my brain just kind of shut down, because it's like most of us don't even know a lot. Maybe one generation, like maybe we knew our grandparents, maybe we only know our parents. Some of us are lucky enough to know our great grandparents, and maybe you know some of the stories or some of the things that they've went through, but there's just so much that we don't know. And so this chronic illness piece is, is really fascinating. And they've, I'm not going to be able to regurgitate a lot of facts, but they've done lots of studies, and like even people who have went as far as like having famine, like hundreds of years ago in like Irish descent. It's like a lot of people will deal with eating disorders. And so to your point, it's like they are actually doing research. And then there's like all the things that sometimes can't be diagnosed. And like, yeah, both of us have had a lot of health things. I'm 40 years old. I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis at the age of 37, and had like chronic digestive issues around my cycle. And like the fact that wasn't, that's a whole tangent of like misogyny is alive and well in our culture, and especially in our medical system, especially for women of color. But yeah, it does feel really relevant. And I think going back to like this is, it's kind of like an ongoing question of like, how do we deal with this? Like, first of all, it's like knowing some of the history and the neuroscience of information around this. And hopefully that can help us have some compassion for ourselves and hopefully for others, because, our bodies are, even when they're struggling, they're super intelligent and they have a lot of wisdom. And that's a big part of the like witch wound also, is like trusting the body and trusting the wisdom, because our society also, when you have chronic health, will be like, there's something wrong with you. And a lot of times it's just a sensitive body that's actually been really attuned and oversaturated. And there's a really brilliant and reasonable reason why it's struggling in the overstimulated society that we live in.
Yeah. Last episode, we were definitely circling around some similar themes and concepts. And this piece around endometriosis, I don't have research on this, but I know I have it, and you just disclosed you have it, which of course I knew, but our audience didn't. And I have a lot of women in my life who are increasingly being diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And I think in part it's just because it's more known now, and so more people are getting it diagnosed. And maybe that's a credit to social media, honestly, even though I'm pretty anti meta platforms myself. But I think, at the end of the day, there's something to that. And there are these correlations that I've noticed between chronic illness, autoimmune conditions, endometriosis, and of course this trait of highly sensitive people and the witch wound. Yeah. So before we go farther, I do want to go more into highly sensitive people and this theme that we're circling around of hypersensitivity, and also that relationship to chronic illness, of course, and the witch wound. But I want to explain for the audience what we mean by HSP, what a highly sensitive person is. So a highly sensitive person was a term coined by the psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron to describe people who have a more sensitive nervous system. And according to her, the estimates accounted that was probably about 15 to 20% of the population. And HSP is not an official DSM disorder, right? It's a trait. It is a form of neurodivergence, and HSPs process information more deeply, picking up on subtleties others might miss, are more affected by other people's emotions, and can become easily overwhelmed by intense stimuli. Personally, I really struggle with smell, which of course correlates to my human design sense, which I'm curious what's happening with that. But historically, HSPs might have been the people sensing danger before others, noticing when someone was sick, picking up on emotional undercurrents, sensitivities that could be called intuition, knowing, or even magic. So there's something about being an HSP, and I know you and I both identify as such, that makes us more susceptible to carrying the witch wound. Like, we literally feel more, sense more, pick up on collective trauma more easily. What do you think?
I definitely think that there is a correlation. There's definitely a correlation there. And with, just thinking about our worlds and, our ages, like we're in the age of like the technology boom, right? Like we still remember being a child and like having little technology, and it's like really risen. And I think about that in particular of like, as a form of overstimulation, just like how in the world right now, like we have access like immediately to things that are going on all over in the world, and our bodies, I don't think we're meant to handle that, right? Like, hundreds of years ago, it would take weeks for people to get information on the other side of the world. And there's pros and cons to this, right? But especially for us sensitive folks, it's just like taking in all of that input. And that's what's happening currently. We already just talked about like the intergenerational wounds and things like that. But yeah, I definitely think there's a correlation with the chronic illness and like what's being held in our bodies. And I think that's why it's so important to, one, be able to like you said, it's not a diagnosis, but to be able to recognize symptomatically, like if it's something that you resonate with, and be able to work with it, because it goes back to that, like, how do you like work with it? It's not necessarily that you're not going to be sensitive, because it's just an innate thing, right? It's a sensitivity. So I think that can be an additional disillusion at the beginning when you find out that you're highly sensitive. There's just this like, oh, well, maybe I can make the sensitivity go away, but it's like you just learn to work with it. And a big part of that is honoring it and seeing the gifts. And there are some things that can feel really challenging, especially in this day and age, especially because of the things that are celebrated in our culture aren't necessarily those traits. And a lot of the sensitivity goes back to this, not always, like we all have feminine and masculine energy, but is connected to the witch wound and like femininity as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it a lot, but we're really taught to reject the soft parts of ourselves, to reject the empathetic parts. Mm-hmm. And that comes in so many forms. I mean, at first, it's like when you're socialized as a woman, it's considered to be a good trait, right? Like they want you to be empathetic as a child, but not too empathetic, mm-hmm. or you're burdensome. And they want you to be empathetic in relationship, but again, not too empathetic. Mm-hmm. And then when you are, and there's backlash, it gets hurt. And every time you get hurt, you shut that part of you, mm-hmm. deeper and deeper inside. And I also really, I struggle with the constant overwhelm and input, yeah. of our news cycle and the world we live in. And that's one of the reasons I'm not on social media. I do have a LinkedIn, but I feel like LinkedIn has way less of an addictive quality than some other media platforms. But I think part of that is just this constant overwhelm of information takes a lot of capacity for me. It takes a lot mm-hmm. of capacity, and it feels like you're deceptively resting when you're scrolling Instagram or something. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I end up feeling more drained. Yeah. And so I've kind of learned at this point, this balance of I have, email newsletter subscriptions I subscribe to. There are a few podcasters that I like for my own news. Mm-hmm. And that feels like I get a little bit more choice in how I engage with it. And it comes in a titrated way, right? Rather than constantly being in my face. And still, sometimes it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And I feel it in my body. It's like there's this kind of numbing buzz that happens when I'm taking in too much. And I kind of feel all these walls coming up around me. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, just pulling further and further inside myself, but in a way that doesn't feel good. It mm-hmm. feels like I'm going into like a dark energy, and there's something metallic. I don't know why I'm having this image of metal, but there's mm-hmm. something like metallic about it for me. Mm. It's like that dark gray quality, and I'm so visual. But I get curious if you think there's any specific ways that the witch wound lives in the body for HSPs. Do you think it's in the nervous system primarily? Is it in our fascia? I don't know. And I don't have answers to this. And I know you don't have exact answers either. I'm just curious how that feels for you.
I think, I think for my lived experience, I would say nervous system for sure. Fascia. Just tissue in general. Because I'm even thinking about endometriosis and it's like an estrogen dominant disease that's like creates excess tissue in and around the reproductive organs. And so just even that and that, going back to this intergenerational, like that's highly, like my mom had it also. So it's highly, what's the word that I'm looking for? Genetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just thinking about, my brain is going in lots of different directions, but like thinking about the nervous system, like our nervous systems are created from our caregivers' nervous systems. And so, this isn't to make like any caregivers or any parents wrong, because parents are human and humaning's hard. Like being a parent is hard. And it's like when you have a highly sensitive child, like they are going to pick up a lot, even pre-verbally around their nervous system of their parent. And so that, that could be circumstances outside of even a parent's control. It's just like chaos, or if you grew up in a like war torn, country, like your little nervous system is going to be so sensitive. And then it's almost like it can get caught and stuck in those places. And that's why it's so important to work with the somatic work, to work with the nervous system as well, because it's just this constant signal of sort of like where we are physically, emotionally, energetically.
I think that's a great segue into working with the witch wound and this idea of healing. And you kind of answered this question a little bit, but whether or not it's like ever healed or if it's an ongoing relationship. Right. And you answered this about HSPs and the witch wound. And I'm curious. And in my own experience, it's kind of like as soon as I felt like I reached a good place with the witch wound, then I like hit the priestess wound, which is just another layer of the witch wound, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such a great question. And like technically the verdict's still out, but my sense is that it is ongoing. And that's been my experience too, like seasons, different challenges in life. Because when you're working with the body, you can create more capacity. You're working with your nervous system, you create more capacity for things. I think a lot of times if we're continuing to grow and evolve, we're continuing to hit the ceiling on that, and then you add like specific trauma that we're trying to heal. And then we're trying to create safety in our bodies. It goes back to what we're saying of like, how do you move forward and what is safe enough? But like, how do you learn how to take care of yourself? Because I think the myth sometimes too is that like, when we talk about nervous system regulation is that we have to be regulated all the time. And the fact of the matter is like, that's impossible. So it's like, how do you work with your system to re-regulate yourself? Because even when you're excited about something, that's can be dysregulation, right? And that's not necessarily negative. And that can be, starting a new project or having a child or like really, incredible things in life that are really exciting and joyful. But, if they're uncertain, life is uncertain.
Totally. And I always say that for me, nervous system healing is more about not getting stuck in one state. It's more about having the ability to move freely through them, right? Like when you're safe, being able to come back into safety faster. And again, by safe, I mean safe enough, right? But when you're home and you're with your dog on the couch and you just have a blanket and a cup of tea, like being able to come back and settle into that space relatively quickly, I think is a sign of a healed nervous system.
Yeah.
And then also a healed nervous system is responsive. It's responsive to the environment, right? It's like, okay, I'm driving and the light turns red and I know to brake, right? Like I need to be able to respond to my environment, even if that is sending us a little bit into sympathetic. I personally feel like driving in and of itself is always a little sympathetic because you have to be so focused. And yeah, and also knowing that it's okay to shut down sometimes, especially when you're sick or when the world's totally overwhelming and your nervous system's like, I just can't. I can't right now, and I need to take a nap. And so it is really about honoring it and allowing it to move freely between the different nervous system states without getting stuck in any one place for too long. Because when we're stuck, that's where, chronic illness shows up. It shows up in the body. It's really just stuck energy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so I guess any practices that might help, or just in general, what's helped you work with this switch wound, and anything from your thesis too that you noticed came up.
So I think one thing too for highly sensitive people is, and this can be hard because of societal expectations, and it's like everything's like blah, 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 let's do it, we got to get it done. Capitalism, like we got to work, is like being able to slow down, take a break. And that may even look like a 30-second break while you're doing something, or allowing yourself to take a breath. So it can be, sometimes it's because of life and situations and circumstances, it can be hard to take like a whole day off or this and that when we talk about self-care. But I think the thing that I find really helpful for myself and like to really empower my clients is to think about these micro ways of self-care and these like small things that we can do. And so again, taking a pause, taking a breath, scheduling in downtime. And, as you mentioned earlier, like your sense of smell is a big part of your sensitivity. My digestion is a big part of my sensitivity. And so this is an ongoing process for me, but it's like, am I in a regulated space when I eat? Am I slowing down when I eat? Like that's one thing. And it's more than just digesting food. It's also digesting life, right? It's like a part of our digestive systems. But you kind of spoke to the social media. I find that highly sensitive folks, like we really, more than others, need to like monitor our social media time, because it can get very overstimulating, and we can, even if we're lying down on the couch, we can get hooked into this like hyper arousal place. And because when you are so empathic, you can literally put yourself into a situation or scenario so deeply, and it can be so intense to be in other people's experiences constantly, because you're also trying to manage your own, and it's feeling as if it's your own when you're in this deep empathic state. And so that can cause a lot of fatigue. So a big part of it too is like highly sensitive folks are often empathic. So it's like, how you work with boundaries, right? Like, how do you show up and be loving and caring? And I think a lot of HSPs are just natural givers. So like, how do you find the balance between giving to others and making sure you're nourishing yourself and filling up your own cup? And that's going to look, different for different folks, whether it's the connecting with nature, whether it's taking baths or just sitting and talking or spending time with people that you love. And I think the energy, you brought this up earlier when you were talking about energy being stuck in the nervous system, but a lot of highly sensitive people are very energetic people. So like finding energetic practices that help. So just a couple that come to mind that are really helpful. Water is really helpful for me. So I will often like take showers throughout the day, and it's not this big long process because I'm trying to clean myself. It's like I just need the water, on my face and my body to just kind of shed the day or shed something that I'm dealing with. And if I don't have time to take a shower, like I'll use just like rose water or something, like spritz it on my face. And sometimes that'll just help me feel like, oh, Like I can breathe, like I'm sludged off some kind of energy that maybe wasn't mine or that I was holding on to. And, you know, energetic practices also can lead into some physical practices. And if you're thinking about, like, we have many more than five senses, but if you can just think about the five senses, like if there are certain scents that you enjoy, like that can be clearing for you. If there's soothing music that regulates your nervous system.
Yeah, we're a big Enya household, my partner and I.
I love all kinds of music, but definitely like ambient or like, what is the like hertz one that everyone always talks about? It's like 420 hertz. Like
the different
beats.
Frequencies. Yeah. The binaural beats. Yeah.
Yeah. So just there's a lot of different things. And like, I like to think about it as like a self-love or self-care recipe because, you know, we're all different and different things are going to help us, but it's nice to put like, find your little recipe book and put in like, what is helpful for me? And I feel really passionate. That was a huge piece of my journey is getting clear on what I needed to support my sensitive body. And it shifts and evolves, right, over time. But I feel really passionate about helping my clients do that too, because it's so empowering. And it helps you, coming back to what you're talking about, the word malleable just kept coming up. Like when your nervous system's more malleable.
Yes, exactly.
And that's like having practices is what helps that.
This is awesome. And thinking back to your thesis, one of the things that struck me was this idea of the cauldron.
Mm-hmm.
The cauldron as metaphor and the cauldron as a practice.
And just to speak to that, I really correlate that with the boundaries. So I think of it in all of my relationships, but when I was writing this, I was thinking about it as a therapist, like my boundary with the client, right? But as a sensitive person, whether you're a therapist or not, if you are highly sensitive, like you are tuning deeply to the people around you and the people that you love. So this idea of the cauldron is like, the cauldron also gets to hold some of it. Because I think as HSPs, we sometimes feel like, I'm going to hold it all. I'm going to internalize it. And that's what causes the nervous system dysregulation and the disease. And it's like, even this visualization practice is like, can I let the cauldron hold some of this for me and the people I love, me and my clients? And like, I don't have to hold it all, but I'm going to hold space for it and we're going to be with it together, but I don't have to hold it. I don't have to carry it. And when I do this practice with clients, it's not like they don't always resonate with the cauldron in of itself, but it could be anything for you. It can be any kind of object. It could be a cloud. It could be some musical instrument. Like it could be a tree, anything in nature.
Yeah.
Anything that's just helping you to resource. Like, I don't have to hold this all on my own. I can feel it. I can move it through the body. You know, even with some more physical, like jumping, shaking, those are really great nervous system releases. Yeah. So there's a lot there. Yeah. Cauldron is a great symbol and it's just, yeah, alchemy. And this kind of feels full circle, but it brings also into this piece, and we kind of spoke towards it, but it's having community. You know, whether you're a highly sensitive person, whether you're specifically like identify as a witch, you're thinking about the witch wound, whether you have chronic health illness, it's like, it can be very isolating and lonely. So like being able to be in community has been one of the biggest gifts and the biggest nervous regulators, the biggest like trauma supports, because some days it's just hard. Like being human is hard. And it's like the people around us that love us can actually see us. That can be one of the greatest gifts, even if we're in pain that day still, but it can help lighten our heart a little bit or help us feel less alone.
It definitely can. And for me, it's also this counterbalance toward putting all my needs in one cup. We are often projected on as empathic healer women, as someone who can meet every need for another person.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner and I laugh about this, but Matt will joke that I meet somehow 95% of his needs, which is probably too high. And right, it's this idea of, well, where are you getting that other 5%? Mm-hmm. Rather than asking more from your partner,
yeah,
or your primary caregiver. Even one parent can't meet every aspect of a child's need, and they don't need to be a good enough parent. And that's a psychology term, good enough parent. But having this diversity of places that you can go with the full range of your emotional experience. And so many people either don't have that at all in their life, or they only have it in partnership, or they only have it in one close one-on-one friendship. And so the idea of having community, of having, and we have our mini coven, and April's part of the goddess coven, but when we're talking about our coven, we're talking about a group of kind of 5 somatic therapist witches of us. There's this idea of like, okay, we have this container that we've set, and the container in a way could be symbolized by a cauldron. And all of our stuff gets to exist in that room because we trust that each of us can hold our own, and that every other person in that room is helping hold it. So no one person is fully burdening another. And you can kind of in that way get rid of this idea of burdening, right? And that's such a great space for me, especially in partnership when my partner's under-resourced, right? Because, in partnership, you tend to be each other's primary support. But it's like, okay, we also need other places. As women, I think it's really important to create community. And I think it's important to create community across gender as well, which is why even though we're doing goddess work here and we're talking about women a lot and witches and the witch wound, I want the goddess coven as a whole to have spaces that are completely inclusive. And so our Heal the Earth mission is a part of that, which I'm really excited about. Also, goddesses as archetypes can be worked with by anyone. And so can this idea of when you feel overwhelmed, asking something else to help you hold it. And I often ask the earth to help me hold things too. And that's why I'm bringing in Heal the Earth, and the symbol of a tree was really resonating with me. Because for me, the earth can hold anything. She's somehow holding all of us. Like we're just tiny little specks of glitter, essentially. Every emotion we ever have is a speck of glitter to her. Glitter dust, really. And so it's so lovely to have so many different places that you can resource. And I think that really matters for healing the witch wound. And also just having places where it's safe to talk about what's coming up spiritually in your life. And so that was one of the intentions of building the goddess coven, is to have this eventual community. And we're still building it. It's not built yet, but to build this community where people can show up as their authentic selves and practice what that looks like, practice what healing the witch wound looks like. And one of the best guides for this is, of course, Hecate, because she's queen of witches. We talked about Hecate in episode 8, and I know you work with Hecate as our guide, but I want to deepen her exploration in this episode as well, since she's the queen of witches, she's maiden mother crone. So from your perspective, how does Hecate help you stand at the crossroads of who I was and who I'm becoming, especially with this week's Sun-Pluto transit, and also help us reclaim power that was taken? What does she teach us about that? I know that's a big question. Take your time.
Yeah, well, Hecate, as Casey knows, is very special to me because that was the first goddess that I ever worked with. And met her in, of course, very transitional time in my life. Yeah, so this idea of having this external support, like this is it's a little existential to answer and a little meta, but it feels like having that as an external resource to just be like, I don't have to go through this alone, because transitions are so, even if we're like ready for them, even if we want them, they can be so uncomfortable, and they can be fraught with a lot of fear, maybe some excitement too. It can be a lot. There can be a lot of conflicting emotions that come up a lot around it. And so using Hecate's wisdom as an anchor is really helpful for me. And just, again, this external resourcing, this like, I am not alone. And when I think and feel into this energy of not feeling like I have to do it all on my own, like that does help me reclaim the power, because it's like I am a part of something that is bigger than myself. It's not just like me and my, while I'm a wise, like strong person, like I'm not belittling like some of my strengths. It's like, but I'm also not from this like egoic place that like I have to like do it all and I have to be a martyr, and I have to like hold it all. It's like, yes, I can have a lot of great attributes, and I can work with things and be resilient, but also like I don't have to do it alone. And so the physical community, but Hecate is also such a spiritual entity. It's like, yes, I am not alone in this. And then there's a lot of ways, like in meditation. I love visualizations with Hecate. I think it really helps me sit in the uncertainty in a way that I don't feel like I was able to quite do in the same way before she was introduced into my life.
Do you feel like working with her makes the visibility piece easier?
Well, I guess I would say that I think she helped me realize that I wanted to be more visible. So there was that like, oh yes, like this is what I want. And this is like, I want to work with the witch wound. I want to be more visible. I don't want to feel this like all this oppression from this lifetime and my intergenerational traumas and past lives. Like, I don't want that to like damper down what I came here to do, what my prarabdha karma was, my curriculum in this lifetime. And I think the actually working with, so for example, like today, there was this like, oh, this is like, I've proclaimed to friends, I'm a part of a coven. And there's lots of ways that I'm like identifying as a witch. But today, being on this podcast with you, Casey, was like, oh, this is like, I don't know who's going to see this or who's going to hear this. This feels like a big visibility reach. And so while Hecate was very supportive with that, it didn't stop the very human emotions and the fear that came up of like, oh my God, the like fast heartbeat, like the nervous energy of like, oh my gosh. And like all the, the blocks that I had come up, or all the things that I had come up. So it's kind of feels like a both and.
Yeah, I agree. What gets me over that hump often is this calling to be visible as teacher, as torchbearer, if we're using Hecate terms, right? Mm-hmm. As the one who guides. And it's like, okay, like I cannot guide others through the witch wound if they don't know that I'm available to do so. And so Hecate carries the torch in the dark. That's what she is. And I think what we're really hitting on is what it means to be a torchbearer when the witch wound says stay hidden, to do the scary thing anyways. And that's what motivates me.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a good way to tie it all together, because it's, again, like it makes it bigger than myself. So it's not about me and my ego and like I have to do this because I want to feel important, or I want people to think I'm cool because I identify as a witch. It's like, it's really cool to be a witch. But it's like I'm doing this because I really want to help other people. And so part of that is going through your own initiation and being able to work for that whole wounded healer. Like that's how we help others, is through working through our own things. And actually, we kind of coming again full circle, like we talked about this at the beginning, where it's like a lot of times the things that you're working on, like you'll be asked again and again to like keep doing those things as a practice. And then you can when you can be that torchbearer, like sit in that flame, it's like, then you have a little bit more, like you can be a better guide or space holder for people because you know what it's like to sit in that fire for yourself.
This is what I've been framing like the whole season and online as the maiden to mother spiral, right? And I think crone is part of that too. I just haven't been speaking to crone because I'm not there yet, though I got my couple grays in. But I think this piece of, okay, we're going to turn inward and see what's my work, and I'm going to focus on me and my personal journey and my personal growth path. Like that's evolved maiden. That's the evolved light piece of the maiden spiral. And then going into mother is, okay, I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to show these lessons and I'm going to teach these lessons and I'm going to lead from that place, whatever that looks like in your life. And this is a huge piece of that, for sure.
Yeah, that is huge. That's really important. And I think it's just so wonderful that you're doing this, like this whole podcast, because you have so much wisdom and it's been so much fun for me to have a personal relationship with you. And then also like to see you like thriving and like sharing your wisdom and like stepping into that teacher mother role. It tickles me.
Oh, well, I think, yeah. I mean, I think there's something really beautiful in being witnessed by people that you know are going to support you. And this idea of what can happen when powerful women witness each other's power instead of fearing it. Mm-hmm. And how that's a piece of healing the witch wound.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a real huge one because a lot of women have fears around friendship with other women, or there's a lot of comparison. And that particular witch wound like runs deep. You know, I think you even mentioned it earlier when you were like, you know, in the like witch hunts.
Oh, yeah. How historically a lot of people were turned in by their neighbors.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so like that in itself is huge. It would be like women who practiced earth magic together, and then there would be fear or intimidation by outside forces, and then they would like give up their neighbor, their sister, their like coven member. And that can be an example of intergenerational witch wounds, and it's really intense. So it's been one of the biggest joys to be able to be witnessed. Like female friendship is just so vital. I think it's vital to a lot of women, but I think there's this Rupi Kaur quote that I love, and I'm not gonna say it verbatim as she does, but it's essentially like, it's like, I can live without romantic love, but I can't survive without female friendship. Is essentially, and so it's this idea of just like being seen so deeply, because of course we can be seen by men and their partners who are men or brothers, friends, you know, but there's like something particular about somebody who's going through your journey and has similar identities. Like that can be very, very resourceful and very supportive.
Thank you, April. It's been so nice to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored. This was fun.
It can be so supportive. And yeah, it's been so nice to have someone that I know so well and who knows me so well on for the first interview. Yeah.
Gosh,
I haven't done an interview before. So This is it. This is our first interview episode. And I mean, here's what I'm sitting with from this, and our audience will get to take away what they want. But I think some of the big pieces are that healing the witch wound doesn't mean that the fear goes away. It means we learn to recognize it and act anyways. And every time I release a podcast episode, the witch wound whispers, like, who are you to teach this? And I release it anyway. And also, we can't heal this wound alone. We need coven. We need sisterhood. We need to witness each other's power and say, yes, you are the witch. You are the priestess. I see you. And if you recognize the witch wound in yourself, for our listeners, know you're not alone. And if you're afraid to claim your power, that fear makes sense. Your ancestors were punished for theirs, but you don't have to carry that fear anymore. This is your invitation to claim what's yours. If this work is serving you and you want to support the podcast, I have a Patreon where you can become one of the Goddess Coven's founding members and have a hand in shaping our new community. The link is in the episode bio to join. And as always, everything we explore here lives in practice. There's a link in the episode description for our free website resources where you'll find our ritual grimoire with basic rituals and spells you can start using right away to reclaim your inner witch. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Trust the spiral. This podcast offers spiritual and psychological education and priestess wisdom. This is not therapy, counseling, or mental health treatment. If you need mental health support, please contact a licensed provider, and in a mental health emergency in the U.S., call 988.